Welcome back to the Heal the Hurt podcast. On today's show, we're going to be talking about why the most successful people on this planet are also the most self-deceived. And they're the highest level of denial. Sounds shocking, but it's true. And you're going to discover why that is and where it comes from. Now, if you're not aware, this is part 2 of a 3-part series where I'm talking about self-deception. And luckily for us, I was able to convince my former therapist, now mentor, colleague, and really great friend, Mike Pinkston, who's an expert in all of these dynamics. So if you've gained benefit from anything that I talk about, much of what I learned came from Mike. He is a gifted teacher, one of the greatest teachers that nobody knows about because his greatest skill is behind the camera, but I'm coaxing him out. So if you want to discover more about this conversation, I urge you, go back to my last show. And that one was how we blame others to feel more powerful. That's the first part of this conversation. Again, I've broken this nearly 2-hour conversation into 3 parts. This is part 2, and then I'm going to release the full uninterrupted version for you. But go back and check out that first one, and you'll see we stopped midstream as we were talking about covert messaging, which really is how we hide all these different perfect imperfections. And so people are unaware that the most successful are also, the most highly deceived. And that transition, you'll be able to understand it a little bit better. But this was a great clean spot because from here, we move into these deeper areas of this aspect of self-deception. So I really think it's going to help you, because self-deception is really the cornerstone and at the heart of everybody's personal struggles. And so the more we can learn about this and how we're deceiving ourselves, because as I pointed out in that first show, studies show that between 10 and 200 times a day, we're lying to ourselves. I know that sounds shocking, but it's true. And we're so unaware of how we're doing that. That's why this is critical, because if we can't see how we're deceiving ourselves, how would we ever know how to heal? How do we know what's truth or not? So enjoy part 2 here. Make sure you set on your calendar to catch part 3. And as you dive into this self-deception journey, as always, enjoy the journey.
And the problem with even talking about the kind of stuff we're talking about is that these messages are covert. And they're implied messages. And I learned a long time ago that implied messages are more powerful than, the overt message.
Give some examples of covert messaging going on right now that people can recognize as deceptive, so they can go, oh. What would be some examples of that?
Well, I mean, the illustration I gave that probably wasn't a very good one, but, it's how do we adapt to these situations? All right. And so going with the person who goes from being discounted and misunderstood to the person who now I'm in charge and I'm going to run. The messages that really tend to impact us are the messages that we have power that we don't have. And one of the things that this is an illustration, it's not really one of those messages, but is the idea that, I have the power to conquer everything, to overcome everything. Well, I don't know anybody that's successful at that. I know a lot of people that talk like they are, but really what's happened is that they inherited this covert message that, I'm strong, I'm stronger than everybody else. I'm smarter than everybody else. And, I can use my strength and my wits to work out of any problem. And my illustration to that is, and I think I even used it with you, is well, go out and lift up the building. You can. Everybody else can. I mean, the perception is that I can, that if I can't, then I'm going to go into less than. Okay. And so I have that deceptive idea that I have to be able to do that I have to control my environment. I have to control everybody in my environment. I have to be smarter, better looking, whatever it is, it's doing esteem type stuff, in order to have self-love and self-acceptance. And that implies, that walled off perspective, however, let me back up. But those messages are so strong that we think that that's true of everybody. And that's a deception too. And, we see, leaders in different aspects of our world, and well, they got that degree and they got this and they got that, or they've got this experience, or they're they're political leaders or whatever. And they can do it, so why can't I do it? And so I go to less than if I can't, and if I do it, then I've really walled off from reality, because nobody can go over here and pick up this building. And yet that message, that implied message, is often given to people, and that for me in my history, that was one of my messages. That as a young child, I remember my father acting out with my mother. He was yelling at her, and I yelled from my room, "Dad, stop it!" And he did. And that started a role. I was 10 years old. I remember it to this day. Started a role that I had the power to, as a child, to stop somebody's rage. I had the power as a child to bring peace into the family, and be a protector. And the reality is, I didn't. The reality is, yeah, he stopped for whatever reason, but the implied message that I could do that was false. I couldn't. And that was part of, in my recovery process, of understanding that not only I couldn't, but I don't have to. Yeah. Whether it's in your life or people that come to see me, my only responsibility is to be able to see myself and be boundaried, and then choose to love myself.
That's what you just said. That story, that example is exactly what I was looking for, because people can identify with that of, oh, how did I yell out and stop behaviors as a child from my parents? How did I gain power? Like, there's a video I have, 23 minutes to forgiveness or something like that. Actually, that's that video I sent you to go, hey, can you check me here and make sure I'm working with her correctly, and one of the false empowerments, one of the ways she was in self-deception was her mother was an alcoholic, and her whole childhood was lost because she became the mother for the whole family, at a very young age, cooking, cleaning, and she, as an adult, saw those things as, well, but those are very good, characteristics, and there's nothing, wrong with that. And I had to impress upon her, you're right. It's very kind and loving, but it's not the responsibility of a child. That's where she was out of reality of, wait a minute, I'm like you, falsely empowered of, no, I'm 8 years old. It's perfectly fine for me to be able to feed the kids and take care of mom and pick her head up out of the bushes because she's been, she's passed out puking in it. That makes me righteous. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, it's very kind and loving. I won't argue that. But my God, it's not your job. Well, that false empowerment.
That is.
The victim and the victimization and false empowerment, and how that's as a child, how we have to, in that moment, make sense of a horrific situation, just like yours. You're experiencing an abusive dynamic. Well, my life depends on these two people. I have to somehow reorganize this horrific event into something that's palatable, that makes it okay, and minimizes it so it's not a big deal. Well, I'm going to step up and go, stop, Dad. Oh, he did. Okay, well, it's not a big deal. Boom, done. But
Right.
now I'm the master of the house, or I have this ability to fix or change. And so people walk around in deception. They don't realize a subtle thing like that has been replaying. Now look in your marriage. You know, like this woman, she picked a man who was an alcoholic who didn't do anything. She was a mother to him. She replayed it. She's still angry and bitter at him, you know, and that's what the work was walking her into the construct she had set up to create her false empowerment and disempowerment. It was a mix of both, as both the victim and the falsely empowered, to walk her into that self-deception, how she was out of reality, that she was reliving that trauma against herself and couldn't see it. But
Right.
the second it came clear to her, she's like, you know, I mean, it was a pretty powerful transformation for her that she had never been able to get to. And,
Right.
and mostly she'd been to, you know, lots of therapy and lots of big name people, but they don't deal with this self-deception. And
Right.
that's what I see mostly, is people aren't helping people in that area. Has that been, do you see the same thing?
I have statements, but I'm not sure it's the answer to that question. So
you can make it either way.
All right. So let me just share what I'm thinking. You know, basically what you're talking about. You know, when I think about this in my own history, it was a lot easier for me to perceive reality where I had some control over it. And so, you know, as a strategy for pain, it allowed me to stuff my pain. You know, I couldn't see it really. You know, I could feel the anger I felt, you know, when things are out of control, and I would get angry to try to, you know, get them into control. But it was and this is true of the false empowered side, that it creates this denial about what's really happening. Okay. And so what happened to my fear? What happened to my pain? Well, I stuffed that and you know, took on this job of like I'm together or something, you know, and really some pretty horrible situations as you know, for a child to be in, and you know, with adults around you that are out of control. And you know what, first of all, you know, that's a false strategy to deal with your pain, because you don't have any pain. You know, I told you that when the first time I did a PMLD type treatment thing, I had this long list of stuff, and I looked, you know, if I'd have read that from you, I'd have been going, oh my God. But I read it from me and I went, there's nothing wrong here. And until, you know, I went and did that workshop, and I kept hearing my stories in other people. And when I heard that, I didn't have that defense. And I started feeling that pain. I started feeling that fear, and I started feeling, you know, that anxiety, and that I wouldn't let myself, you know, it just got turned off. And I could see how that affected them, and then it made it okay for me to start seeing how that affected me. And you know, the sad part of it is that there was a lot of sadness and there was a lot of pain that came up with that. I didn't even know it was there, except that, you know, if I got in a situation where I felt powerless, you know, I just turned on the anger. And, you know, I've told you this story, but this is an example of that. You know, I'm driving out of 7-Eleven one night with my wife in the car, and this guy flips me off, and you know, I'm like, did you see that? And I look back at him again, and he flips me off again, and I still don't know why he was doing that. But what did I do? I go into action. You know, I got to control this. You know, and so I throw the car and park. I get out of the car and the guy's walking into 7-Eleven and he's bigger than I am, and I don't care. I'm big enough to handle the world, right? And I said, hey, buddy, why are you flipping me off? And he said, oh, F you. And he turned around, walked, and I kicked him in the butt. And then he turned around and came at me. And I was involved with martial arts in the past, and I put him on the ground. And he was like, stop. Well, I did. Thank goodness. He ended up calling the police on me, and probably should have. But when I got in the car with my wife, reality hit. And she said, what were you doing? I mean, not only could you have been killed, I could have been killed. Mm. And that's when it hit me. It's like, and in fact, that was 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Wasn't 40, but it was 30 years ago. And that's when I went, wow, there's this whole part of me that there's something really wrong. And that was one of the things that took me to that workshop. There were others too, but that ended that for me because, I came to grips with the pain that was behind that anger. And I would have never seen it because that message was what, kept me in denial, to use your terms, and kept me in deception about, what was going on with me.
Yeah,
and
just take that simple situation. Look at how many times road rage, those incidents happen. People flip each other off, have a fight, and it's all over social media.
That was me in my 20s.
Sure. But it's even now, I mean, people commenting on my post will, pick fights or, whatever. And that's what people don't realize right there. All that rage, that anger, that's the self-deception. That's the denial. Mm-hmm. That's the inability. Like, they don't see that. And I don't call them bad people. We don't teach. Right. That. Do you realize that like you were unaware until that moment? Whoa. I've got a problem here. Now, how did you become aware of a problem? Because you educated yourself on all this stuff that we don't teach.
Right.
And so everyone's suffering politically, socially, relationally, all these health, everything. Because, as I call it, emotional mastery. A lot of this, look, you can't blame anybody. It's really, as I say, in the last 50 years, we're starting to talk about emotions. For a species that's been around for millions, billions of years, to be 50 years into it, that's why I say the next frontier is emotionally. It's not tech and all, that's all silly. It's that the younger generation is starting, they don't have a leader yet to teach them how to deal with their emotions, but they want to. And they think it's great to deal with. You're seeing these athletes, they're quitting, going, hey, and I wish they wouldn't call it mental health, because I don't think that's what it is. It's emotional health. Mm-hmm. That's what the real term is. And that's a whole nother topic of how we don't, that's also denial and self-deception. We won't call things what they are, because emotionally, we don't have the development to recognize, oh, it's not a mental problem. It's an emotional problem. It's emotional health that is making us stressed, anxious. Those are emotional issues. Those aren't mental problems. But at any rate, the point is much of our deception is because as a society, we are so deceived as to what is really the source of the problem. And so I don't, that's why there's no blame in it. But if you're still listening, then you get the choice, like you gave me.
Right.
To choose if you want to be response able, learn a response that gives you an ability to make a different choice, or choose to not take responsibility and play the victim or the falsely empowered.
Right. Well, and I want to go back to something, and it goes back to the tennis courts and the nets. The person you described, I'm not that different than that person either. And really what we're doing is we're jumping over the net and we're going over and we're caretaking. And we get kudos for caretaking, and that seems, like a positive thing. There's a radical difference between caretaking and caregiving.
Yeah, love that.
And caregiving comes from me being on my side of the net.
Yeah.
Caretaking means I come over and I take care of you. And I do, get, a lot of positive messages for doing that. And for me, that was really what, I basically became, the way I avoided pain is I would caretake instead of, and I wouldn't caretake me, I'd caretake you. Yeah. And when I began to heal, I not only could give you care, which implies that you have the abilities to give yourself care. And I had the ability to do that for myself as well. And so that brought me in my head to that needless and wantless thing, like in my family, what I saw is if anybody expressed vulnerability, no one did that. And if they did, somebody would get hurt typically, or that was my impression. And so, I was kind of proud of the fact that I didn't have needs and wants, that I could take it.
Yeah.
Now that's an implied message. I can take, well, that's a message for men in particular. I do believe. Now I'm not, I've always said when it comes to self-care, the worst woman, female, is better than the best guy typically, because they are empowered more than we are. Not everyone, but most are. But men, we aren't. And so what do? We get busy, we get doing things, and we don't even recognize our needs unless it comes with, what I hear all the time is, sex, and but it's creating this image that I'm impenetrable and that I don't have needs and wants and I can do anything, I can do everything, which is very narcissistic. It's not real. It's again, it's living behind the wall, it's living deception. But for me, when I saw someone have a need, even if it was a healthy person, I saw it way over on the other side as being needy, and needy people get hurt. And so it's better for me to be needless and wantless. And I even as a therapist, I used to make up that whole thing was better than being needy. And it's not. It may have the appearance that it's better, but it's not, because again, who gets lost in the mix? Me. And when that happens, I'm living in a false reality.
I love how the power of words, caretaking versus caregiving.
Right.
You see the people pleasers are takers, but they're deceived. Oh, I'm so nice. Who was it? Bradshaw, I think, talks about killing with kindness, and that there's a deceit to it, and there's a twisted sadistic nature to it of I'm so nice. And my mom was that way. My mom would kill you with kindness. And I always felt like, God, when she'd get really nice, it felt like something was being taken from me. And that's that sadistic quality of those people that are so nice. There's a taking to it. They're trying to caretake you, but that's why I love that word. It looks like I'm giving you care, but really what I'm doing is I'm in deception that I'm taking from you. I want power. I want to be your savior. I also want credit. and how I don't take care of me, how I do so much for you. Like there's all these, covert messages and covert processes wrapped up in caretaking versus caregiving. And, that's what I had to learn was I was a master caretaker and was taking. I never talk about self-deception. So I have a whole chapter in my book, The Day I Saw My Darkness, when I realized how evil my caretaking was. And it's still hard. Like I'm feeling the emotion come up to admit that truth, that my niceness wasn't nice. And
right.
I'm sad about that. I'm sad at the pain I inflicted on myself and others, because that's what we don't get. That boomerangs back because we lose relationship when we're caretaking. People push us away or they feel the manipulation, but relationship is not possible because it's your tennis court analogy. It's, you're on the wrong side of the net. There's no separation.
Right.
There's relationship must have a boundary for relationship to exist. It's not a walled off or consumptive all on one side. And so that emotion isn't just for the hurt I caused others. It's the hurt I caused myself because I can't have relationship when I'm taking as I give care to you. So caregiving, as you pointed out, that's not always about you.
No.
That's me. That's me also learning, you taught me that with Arlie. And, when I first dating her, that a lot of her behaviors didn't work for me. And I could give to both of us by staying on my side of the tennis court. I didn't change her or tell her what to do, but I had to learn how to go, oh yeah, that just doesn't work for me. It's your life, but I'm just staying over here on my side and I'm not going to participate in that. And that was giving to me. I no longer felt powerless. I didn't feel needy. I didn't feel, all of a sudden my drive for sex went down because I was caring for myself. It didn't get displaced into, and that people will use working out, animals, sex, food,
success,
all these different things. Versus, wait a minute, I just need connection with me. I need to give care to me. And now I don't even care what's going on your side of the net. I'm not so hyper vigilant as to how.
Yeah, and I think you're overstating that a little bit because I think you do care about that's the whole thing. Is that
wrong choice of words? You're right. Thank you.
You can care, but you don't have to. You said it. What I was thinking, at least nailed it on the head, was caretaking is about manipulation. It's manipulating the environment so that I can be comfortable. And also so I can be a hero, so I get kudos for that. But it really isn't about giving care. It's about manipulating either the person or the environment so that I can feel safe in a false way. And it's not real. And men really struggle with this. I get it. Most men just don't want to face that they do have needs and wants. They don't want to face that they have pain inside because they spend their lives, and that's how we're taught, don't feel, the only appropriate emotion for a man growing up is it's okay to be angry unless you're causing trouble for your mom, or your teacher, but men are empowered that way, and we're not, so we spend a life building this whole thing of this image that we think we're supposed to uphold, and then we get in a relationship with a woman, and she wants to know us, and we don't even know us. And she wants to have relationship, and she wants to share, and she wants to you to share your dreams, and you build something together. Well, with some men, that's impossible. I mean, they think it's impossible because the deception is, I'll give you that impression because I need you for that right now. But the reality of, being in that place of vulnerability where we're sharing our dreams together and sharing our goals and our life things together, that's too much for most guys, or it feels like it is. And they don't want to feel that. They don't want to feel that I don't have control over this situation. And so what do? They go to work, or they go find somebody else who will allow them to have the facade. And what happens in the relationships with their kids and with their wife. And, I know you wanted to do that different, and I certainly wanted to do that different. That was a big thing for me, that I wanted my kids to be able to grow up, first of all, in an environment where they were safe at home, but also where they could be known, and they could have differences, and they could develop their own personhood. And that's not possible without two parents who are working on growing and changing and maturing.
Well, that concludes episode 2 of this 3-part series on self-deception. When we move into episode 3, we're going to talk about how to know if you're self-deceived. As you could see, the conversation started to move towards the roots of self-deception, which is childhood. It's the parenting we receive. And that's the most difficult piece of self-deception. We don't want to admit that there might have been difficulties or imperfections in our childhood, or that our parents, there's a real wall around that. And that's at the crux of the issue, is learning how to break down that wall and get into truth. Our parents adored us. They loved us perfectly, but they are human and they are imperfect. And those imperfections have created this whole dynamic, and they are not to blame. It's part of being human. They were raised by perfectly imperfect parents, but because as a society, we don't really challenge this and take this on, that's the cause of our struggles. So again, I encourage you, tune in to the next episode. As you recall, I post Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. So make sure you tune in to the next episode of this, and it's titled How to Know If You're Deceived. And in the meantime, please share this with those if you feel that somebody could gain value from, maybe they're in self-deception and don't realize how it works. Please share it with them. And as always, enjoy the journey.